When I think about my childhood, I don't remember toys, holidays, or the smell of baked apples. All I remember is the road, a narrow trail winding between the hills, leading north, into the cold, into fear, and toward what we then called hope. I was 15, my brother 11. I was tall but thin, with hands constantly scratched and bruised. He was stubborn, always laughing, with a mess of red hair and eyes that held the whole sky. After our mother died, we were left with our father, or rather, beside his body. He was sick. First a quiet cough, then wheezing, gasping for breath, unable to rise from bed. In the village, people whispered, this was the end. One evening, the healer, an old, nearly blind woman with fingers like oak roots, called us over. Holding a pouch of dried herbs, she whispered, there's a tree in the north, older than anything you know. Its roots hold sap that can awaken life. But getting there, and returning, not everyone can do that. She handed me a map drawn in charcoal on rough cloth. I looked at it, then at my brother. He nodded. We left before sunrise. Our father never knew. I left him a cup of water, a piece of bread, and a note, even though I knew he couldn't read. We walked for days, through ravines where the ground shifted like it breathed beneath our feet. We crossed a river using planks from an old bridge. I held my brother by the wrist. He was terrified of water. Ever since mother drowned, he couldn't even step in a puddle. But this time he clenched his teeth, shut his eyes, and walked across. I was proud of him, silently, like older brothers are. We met giants, not literal ones, of course. A brother and sister, outcasts living in caves among the rocks. They didn't speak our language but showed us kindness. One gave us a water skin, the other a woolen scarf. That was when I first understood. Even the wildest souls can be kinder than the neighbors you've known all your life. There were moments I wanted to turn back. When the wind sliced my face like a knife, when my legs burned from exhaustion, when the map looked like meaningless scribbles. But my brother kept going. He laughed when he found edible berries, told stories about knights, and drew pictures in the dirt with a stick. He knew death might wait for us at the end of the road, but he believed that life might too. When we reached the frozen valley, I realized we were truly alone. No birds, no beasts, only snow crunching underfoot. We found the tree, towering like a spire, its bark glowing faintly from within, like golden veins. But by then, my brother was coughing, first softly, then blood. I didn't notice at first. He never complained. He waited for me to reach the summit and collect the sap. I climbed, slowly, step by step. Every meter felt heavier, as if something pressed down on my shoulders. When I touched the trunk, it responded, as if it understood why I had come. I filled the flask with sap, came down, and found him lying in the snow, his face pale, lips blue. He was breathing, but barely. I began. We're almost home. Just hold on. He opened his eyes and smiled. You'll bring it to him, right? I nodded. He closed his eyes and never opened them again. I walked back alone. I don't remember the road. Don't remember how I crossed the rocks or forded the same river. I carried him on my back until I couldn't anymore. Then I buried him under a tree with red leaves. I placed beside him the stones he'd been collecting the whole way. He used to say, each stone is a moment. Together, they tell a story. The story was told. My father lived. I gave him the sap, fed him with a spoon like a child. He woke after 3 days, looked at me and asked, "Where is he?" I didn't answer. I just laid my brother's scarf, the woolen one from the giants, in his lap. Since then, he's alive, but barely speaks. We sit together in the evenings, he in his chair, me by the door. Sometimes he looks at me like he wants to ask, but I know words would never be enough. Years passed. I grew up, stayed in the village. I work in the forge. Sometimes on my way to the well, I hear light footsteps beside me. I don't turn around. I know who it is. He still walks with me, and probably always will until I leave this path for good. 5 years have passed. 5 winters. Since I returned from that journey, much has changed. But inside me, everything remains where it was, like a room no one ever cleans again. My father died last spring, quietly, without suffering, fell asleep and never woke. He didn't live to see the first storm. He'd always feared thunder. I buried him beside our mother, under the lilac tree. No priest, no words, just a piece of cloth my mother had sewn, laid gently over his grave. He earned his peace, and strangely, with his death, I felt not loneliness but freedom. Bitter, cold freedom, but freedom nonetheless. The house is quiet now. I didn't rebuild it, didn't throw out the old things. My brother's room is untouched. Books, the fur-lined cap, the little wooden ship on the shelf. Sometimes I go in just to stand there, to breathe in the scent of old wood and warm dust. I think a lot, especially at night when the shadows stretch to the ceiling. I wonder, why did I survive? Why not him? He was kinder, brighter. People say, it was your test. But maybe it was the opposite. Maybe for him it was a reward, and for me a path. One day, a boy came to our village. Strange child, barefoot with eyes like my brother's. Lost. No one knew where he came from. He said nothing, just looked around, as if searching for someone. I sat him near the hearth, gave him bread, warmed milk. What's your name? I asked. He didn't answer. A few days later, some old man from a nearby farm took him in. But while he stayed with me, I told him stories every evening. About the road leading north. About the tree that heals. About brothers. He listened without blinking. And when he left, he hugged me. Briefly, then walked away without looking back. I think I understood. He wasn't really a boy. Or not just a boy, or maybe my grief painted miracles. I'm 21 now. I know many things. How to forge a blade, mend a harness, speak the dialects of nearby folks. But the most important thing I've learned is to listen. To people, to the wind, to silence. Each summer I go north. Not all the way, not to the tree, but to the hills where the path begins. I sit there from morning till night, sometimes 3 days. People say it's strange. I call it not letting go. Sometimes I dream we're walking again. He's ahead. I follow. He turns, waves, says, almost there. I smile, and everything inside me trembles with joy. A baby was born in the village recently. They gave him my brother's name. Not in his honor, they just liked the name. But when I heard his mother call out, my heart jolted, as if someone called me from far away. I don't know if any of this has meaning. Maybe life is just a chain of accidents, with no path, no purpose. But deep down, I believe there is something beyond. A road we all walk, and those we've lost walk with us, even if we can't see them anymore. My brother didn't leave. He didn't vanish. He just walked a little farther ahead. And one day, I'll catch up to him. 3 more years have passed. I'm 24 now. My hair has darkened. My shoulders have broadened. I've learned not only to work with the hammer, but to read as well. An old teacher who lived in an abandoned chapel at the edge of the village agreed to teach me in the evenings. His hands trembled, and he smelled of mold and ink, but his voice was kind, and there was silence in his eyes. He said, "The one who writes his pain no longer carries it on his back." I tried, and since then I write. The notebooks are kept in a box under the bed. In them is everything. The journey, my brother, the tree, the map with the prints of our fingers. Sometimes I read them out loud, not to myself, but to the one who can't be seen, because I know he listens, always. In the 7th spring after that road, I went to the hills again, but this time not alone. There was a girl with me, slim as a reed, with eyes the color of river water. She came to the village in winter with a convoy of refugees, lost her family, spoke little. But one day, as I sat by the well, turning one of my brother's stones in my fingers, she came up and asked, "Is that yours?" I didn't answer right away, just gestured, "Sit down." She did, stayed silent, looked at the sky. Then she said, "I lost someone too." That's how it began. We weren't a couple. We were like two coals in the same palm, burning and warming each other at once. In the spring, she said, "Show me that path. I want to understand why you go there." And I led her. We walked for a long time. The snow was gone, but the stones remembered. I showed her the places where my brother laughed, where we hid from the rain, where I first screamed at the sky in despair. She listened, never interrupted. Sometimes she'd lay her hand on my shoulder, lightly, as if not to disturb the memories. When we reached that tree, not the same one, another young on the edge of the hill, I sat down and said, "This is where the path ends." Why? Because beyond this point is not for the living. I've been there. Once is enough. She nodded, then pulled a small pendant from inside her tunic, opened it. Inside, a dried lilac petal. "I took it from your parents' grave," she said softly, "so you'd have something to leave behind." I placed the petal under the roots of the tree, into the soil, not as an offering but as remembrance. Last summer our daughter was born. We named her Naya after my mother. Her eyes reflect the sky like my brother's. Sometimes I catch myself looking for familiar features in her smile, and I find them. When she cries, I take her in my arms and tell her fairy tales about giants, about a river you can't cross without courage, about a tree that whispers to those who know how to listen. And every time I finish, I whisper to her, "Do you know who told me these stories? Your uncle. He was the bravest boy in the world." Sometimes it feels like the world has shifted. The river flows a different way. The stars have changed places, but the path still leads north. Only now, when I go there, I'm not seeking death. I'm seeking silence, to remember, to speak. And every time, in that very spot where my brother once said, "We're almost there," I stand, look into the distance and smile, because now I know the road never ends. As long as someone remembers, someone walks, someone tells the tale, it continues. It does not die, like my brother who simply went a little ahead. And when my daughter someday asks, "Dad, who was my uncle?" I'll answer, "He was my path." I'm 17. My mother says I take after my father, stubborn, reserved, as if made from flint and water. And my father, when he thinks I can't hear, calls me by her name, Naya, but with a certain sadness, as if speaking to someone who isn't here. I understand. I've understood for a long time. Since childhood, I knew. Our family had a silence that no one touched. A room we didn't enter without cause. A small tree in the garden under which nothing else was planted. And a path old, overgrown, leading north. My father went there every summer. Alone. Came back with eyes in which snow still burned. He never forbade me from going. But he never invited me either. But this summer he didn't go. He just said, "If you want, go. But remember, the path isn't for running away. It's for those ready to find." I walked for 2 days. The stones were smooth, the sun lazy, and the sky as high as in his stories. I wasn't afraid. I felt as though I was returning to something I already knew. And at some point I understood I truly was walking in his footsteps. Not just physically, in memory, in blood. I passed through the forest where, according to my father, giants once lived. Found carved initials on the trunk of a pine, N and N. Small, clumsy, but alive. I ran my fingers over them, like greeting past lives. On the 3rd day it rained. I took shelter in a crevice, ate bread, listened to the drip of water. For the first time I understood why my father came here. Nothing was required. No words, no justifications. Just you and the path. On the 4th day I reached the hill. That same one, he showed it to me when I was 8. Back then he said, "I won't go any further. This isn't my path anymore. But maybe one day you'll continue." I climbed higher. The air changed. Cleaner, harsher. And suddenly, in the distance between the cliffs, I saw a tree. Not a legend. Real. Tall. With bark through which lunar blood seemed to flow. It was alive. And old. Very old. I approached. Quietly. As if to a temple. Pressed my palm to it. And I felt warmth, a pulse, a flash of memory that wasn't mine. 2 boys, one helping the other, one laughing, the other clutching a flask of juice. I wept, not because it was sad, but because all of it was true, and I was part of that truth. I was not just a daughter, I was a continuation. When I returned, my father was waiting on the porch. He looked at me and said, "You saw it." I nodded. He didn't ask what. He didn't need to. He knew. We sat in silence. Then he smiled, as if, for the first time, he let go of a burden he'd carried since he was 15. Now I go there every summer, not because I'm searching, but because I want to preserve, so that someone after me knows there was a path. There were brothers. There was love strong enough to go beyond death. One day I'll tell this story to my children, then to my grandchildren, and when they walk there to the north among trees and stones, they'll feel footsteps beside their own. Because my uncle is still walking. Because the path never ends.